Welcome to the Church Planters Experience. If you find value in these conversations, please share them with others.
Hi, my name's Elli. Last name is Marks. I grew up in Seattle, Washington, and didn't become a true follower of Christ until I was about 21 years old. And just in my youth, got involved in a lot of the Seattle music scene, drugs and partying and DJing and stuff like that prior to my conversion. And but yeah, Lord did a great work.
Greetings, thanks for having us. My name's Micaiah Busweiler, and 55 years of age. I'm a recovering rich young ruler, having once been a clothing designer, graphic designer, very involved in the whole youth counterculture movement of the 90s, skateboarding, surfing, BMXing, all of that kind of thing. That's become a multi-billion-dollar industry, and by the mercy of the Almighty, He put it in my heart to consider my ways and my latter end. And unlike the rich young ruler, I forsook everything for the sake of the gospel. And by His mercy, I've been continuing since 1995.
My name is Gabriel Brown, and I grew up a young man without any religious direction, so kind of pagan, and yeah, had some difficulties with that, growing up. But in 1998, I was 19, and I was invited to go to church with some people, and ended up having a really radical born again conversion experience where the spirit of just conviction and joy came upon me, gave me a new heart, gave me a purpose when I was lost and confused about my direction, and He turned me into an evangelist since then. And yeah, He's been really long suffering and patient with me on the journey, but it's been one that I do not regret. And just want to keep going forward, strength to strength, through His grace and power.
So all of you, the way I understand, all of you joined the Sojourners in the 90s sometime. Is that right?
A little over a year ago at this time, Gabriel and I just seen that just kind of moving in different directions. And after walking very closely in intentional community and really in one another's lives, we lived together, we traveled together, we ate together, we prayed together and such, did ministry together. Yeah, it's things ebb and flow over the years where there's just kind of a different direction, different times. It's kind of unfortunate. It's the only expression of Christianity that we've really known. Of course, we've been around all kinds, but yeah, we could see like the Almighty's hand in it, and He's hopefully like a dandelion blowing us out into different areas to be an encouragement, and also to just be excited about what the next step is for us in ministry and how we could serve and be a blessing.
So you three brothers have been in Oregon, Portland, Oregon, is that right?
Yeah, the past few months, yeah, we decided that out of all the places in the United States, we thought Portland was a mission field that we wanted to thrust in our plow. Yeah.
And what's drawing you to Portland? Like, why Portland?
Well, when you circumnavigate the country in a very prayerful state, and you visit many churches and hospitality, like Christian hospitality houses, and you just really are asking for direction and guidance, and you get blown back to the West Coast where we had like spent some time doing ministry in times past, and it just that's where the doors open, and that's where we felt most encouraged to be. So
So I know several of you, either Sojourners or former Sojourners, and was like the mid to late 90s to the 2000s kind of the heyday of the Sojourners, or like what?
Whew.
I mean,
Yeah.
we as Anabaptists, we haven't picked up a lot of people along the way.
Sure.
It's been occasional.
Yeah.
But it seems like the Sojourners like really blew up in the '90s. Like
Yeah,
what?
well, it came from the the early '70s. It was birthed out of the Jesus movement. It was a small little house fellowship in Missoula, Montana, and there was a desire to just live more intentional, to be more like Acts chapter 29 in a sense. Like the movement didn't stop at Acts 28. We're the continuation of
Yeah.
that, and so they saw that there was a need to be evangelistic, and so they just took to the road and started going to cities and ministering, and people would come, people would leave. Like any church, you have people that, or
And this was in the late '70s,
late, yeah. Oh no, sorry,
Early,
early
maybe?
'70s.
Yeah.
early
Yeah,
'70s.
early '70s. It was during the Jesus movement, where a lot of radical things were happening on the West Coast, and young hippies were getting completely transformed. And not saying that the whole movement was perfect, but definitely lives were changed.
Hmm.
And it was really neat. So I came in '95, and so I'd say like throughout the '90s, early '90s, there was a desire that the Lord would send forth more laborers into the harvest, and it seemed like He answered that. I was part of that. There was a lot of young people that were disenfranchised with what the world had to offer. I think much like what's happening today as well. And there was, yeah, lots of new brothers, new sisters. There was lots of evangelistic efforts put forth in big cities to just witness and
So, I mean, what did the evangelistic efforts look like? Like,
I just want to
go
add
for
to
it.
something I just shared about why Portland, and I think that will tie into this question as well. And we have been like a kind of a frontline ministry. That's kind of where we were raised. We're just out on the streets, campuses, and just want to be like where the action is. And there was an opportunity for us to stay in Lancaster and do ministry with the Sojourners, but for me and Micaiah, we were just like, this is the end of us, you know. And it's, like, there's a work to be done there because
yeah,
there's a
yeah,
lot
okay.
of Amish
Yeah,
seeming
yeah.
like they're getting converted, born again, and they want to break out of their groups and they need a place to come. So there's like, there's a valid ministry there, and it's like great, I think, for families and stuff like that. But as just single men, just accustomed to the battle, it seemed like Portland in the Northwest in general is a very unchurched area, and I think that also drew us there. Just the need for more Christians,
makes sense,
to
yeah.
represent. Yeah.
And some of us came out of that context, like in where uh, there that's where, in a sense, where you meet. There's lovely communities of Anabaptists, and they have a lot of things that they preserve that are unique to themselves, but they're not out there as much reaching out to the because of fear of the contamination from the world. And those were the ones that impacted our lives, and so there's a like a love that we have. I
Yeah.
think maybe we more personally have because we came out of it and see the need for it also.
Right.
Like not too many Amish or Mennonites are on the North Shore, Hawaii, on the beach, approaching me. Well, I want to after a near drowning experience, want to rededicate my life back to God, and they weren't there to reach out to me.
or Miami Beach, Florida, where it's just makes Sodom and Gomorrah look like kindergarten.
Yeah.
But
I mean, that's probably the big question. Like, as you are moving, I mean, I can see, for three men, it looks like it's probably you're the right people to invade that kind of territory.
yeah,
Um,
One
like,
man
like
said,
special ops.
Yeah, one
Yeah.
man said, we want to stand a yard away from hell and redirect traffic. You
Okay.
know?
But I guess the question was though, how did that work in the Sojourners, and how's that like, how do you go about evangelizing?
I think it's just being present. I mean, like when you look at how Jesus did ministry, he was just among the people. It's really interesting too to consider that what was it about him that publicans and sinners felt comfortable being around him? You know what I mean? Like constantly he's in a situation where these people are coming up to him and he's healing them and he's not judging them. He had more stern judgments for the religious elite than he did for publicans and sinners. But when you think about going into areas maybe like Patrick Matthews, he's like among some of like dregs of society that people just don't want to be around, but they probably love being around him because he has the heart of Messiah in him. And so when you have these really ruffian people that feel comfortable around you, I believe like that's the spirit of the Almighty, because these are his children and they're lost at sea and they're just swallowed up and taken captive by the adversary at his will. And the Son of Man's come to seek and save that which is lost. But too often, I think we just want to settle down in our comfort zones and build condos on the other side of the Jordan instead of going in and taking more ground for the kingdom, you know? So just doing incarnate missions, like where we could be the presence of the Almighty and have his spirit move among us in a way that we could just build relationships with people without being judgmental. Of course, that doesn't mean we just, I think like Jesus spent time with publicans and sinners, and he was actually accused as being a drunkard, but I don't think he was in the taverns just getting all, kind of lit up.
Right.
He was actually in areas where he could compel them to come out, to be separate. Like, I've consecrated you to be kings and priests, and to have dominion over these things that you're supposed to rule over, right? So just being around people, knowing the heartbeat of people, and if you're out far away from where they're at, you're disconnected. So it's really stood out to me, and more recently too, um, that if you look at the epistles, it's the church of Rome, it's the church of Corinth, it's the church of Galatia, and um, the Colossians and the Philippians, and these are all awful cities, very influential cities as well, where there's so much ungodliness and lasciviousness, and especially in Antioch. I think that's really neat that the place where like some of the most corrosive and toxic soil, this group of people who were disciples, who were apprentices, learners of Messiah, are risen up and they're given the name Christian there, which we were talking about that before, which some people will say a Christian means like a little Christ. Well, the word in Hebrew is Mashiach, and it means anointed. So, or Mashiach in Hebrew. So,
Like slather with oil.
yeah, to slather with oil, and kings, prophets, and priests were anointed with oil. They were separated and consecrated for a very specific purpose. And so, as Christians, we've been anointed with His Holy Spirit and consecrated for very specific purpose. To be kings, to be priests, to offer up sacrifice, to make reconciliation between man and the Almighty. So it's good to reclaim what that means as Christians. And again, like these really toxic cities is where something so beautiful emerged, and it reminds me of, like, imagine Chernobyl, the meltdown there. Like a nuclear waste site, like nothing. It's so radioactive, nothing's going to grow. But it's kind of in the midst of that soil that this organic, wholesome fruit emerges, and you have to ask yourself the question, how in the world does that happen? And it's like, well, this is the place where the gates of hell are not going to um, overcome this thing. Like, that's where Messiah is going to plant his church, in these toxic places that the evil empire, in a sense, that seeks to get deep into the marrow of our bones. It's like, this is where it stops, right here. So yeah, we just want to be a beautiful fragrance and a blessing, like, because where sin abounds, grace did much more abound. So we should expect that grace would be more abounding in cities where iniquity is flourishing, right?
So do you go out, hold up signs? Do you pass out tracts? Do you do any kind of evangelism, like the traditional-ish evangelism like that, or do you, like, what's your methods?
Yeah, we've used, just depends on the situation, discernment, really.
Yeah.
We've done the traditional with signs. We kind of switched it up though, from like your average college campus signings, and some of the messages can be pretty provocative, whereas we like to do more thought-provoking
So
signs.
what's a good thought-provoking sign? Like, if you're gonna hold up a sign on a college campus, what's a good sign?
Yeah, like, does wealth correlate with happiness, or
Mm-hmm.
is there
Wait,
anything really right or wrong?
Does wealth correlate with happiness?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
that'd be a really interesting thing.
Lots of questions, and that way, like, people can come to you with an answer, and you give them a platform for, talking. And I think it's really important in a discussion that you show a lot of interest and you ask questions and you give them the space to share their heart. And then when you do that, then you got material to work with as far as like getting an understanding of where they're at and how to, from where they're at, lead them closer to the gospel or hopefully reconciliation, with their maker.
Right.
Yeah, not preaching at people, but simply encouraging dialogue. Too often, I think evangelism could be like a drive-by shooting, really, where the preacher just goes there and lights the place up with all these Bible verses, and then they go back and talk about how persecuted they were for sharing the gospel. It's like you got buffeted for your iniquity because you don't even know the people who you're witnessing to, and you go in there and just don't really discern. You're just upset and angry, maybe because the sins of the nation or the people are the very things that you're struggling with yourself. Like, I think I've noticed people that preach really heavy about sexual immorality, the very ones that struggle with that. And it's a hidden sin, and so that's their way that they can really lash out. So I think at this time, it's important to understand like who you're preaching and the struggles that these people go through, the anxiety that the youth are dealing with. You have to know, like with fishing, you have to know the right lures to use, if you hope to catch, any kind of fish.
So that's kind of like speaking of fishing, that's like how you cast out a really
So-
big net. It's sitting there with a sign.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty wide net.
Yeah.
What are
Yeah.
some other messages you would use on the sign besides does wealth correlate with happiness? What did you say the other one was?
Anything really right or wrong?
Is anything really right or wrong?
Go ahead.
What was the one that you had when you do the chalk signs that people would stop and?
I forgot about that.
Yeah, there was a tragedy that took place in University Santa Barbara campus where a college shooter ended up killing maybe 6 people and himself, and we heard the gunshots. We were about 300-400 yards away from where he actually took his life. And so the next day there was all kinds of reporters and little shrines where people had died. And I just walked into the midst of a group of people, took some chalk, and I simply wrote in calligraphy, Jesus wept, and turned around and walked away and let people just deal with that message. And I started to go around the city, the college campus really, and just write Jesus wept everywhere. And two young people, a man and a woman, approached me and they said, "What is this all about? Like, I've been seeing this throughout the campus." And I said, "Well, like, God's not indifferent to our sorrows. Like, when we cry, he cries with us." And I saw that I really gripped and captivated these young people's minds, talking about the love of the Father and how he cares about the brokenness of humanity. And so we ended up going back. We took a bicycle trip up to Montana, then came back to California. And I had an idea about just doing big chalk pieces in beautiful calligraphy. So I was doing things like I wanted to do this thing since 30 AD, roughly when Messiah started his ministry. So I would write messages like loving the loveless since 30 AD and setting the captives free since 30 AD. And then we ended up going to New York City, and we were in Union Square and Washington Square Park, and I was doing bigger messages, things that, like, my favorite one was, "What are you living for?" And when you ask questions, whether people stop and talk to you or not, they read it and they have to deal with themselves. If you ask a good question, like you probably won't speak to 95% of the people that walk by, but you've engaged them and they're thinking about what this message is about. Yeah, what am I living for? When I boil down the hours and when I think about what I get in exchange, am I just like serving myself and I don't have time to do what I really want to do, and I seem to be raising funds rather than my family?
So when you're out holding up a sign, you're viewed as somewhat, even if this message is nice, you're still viewed as being somewhat aggressive or somewhat protestant or something.
Not really.
But when you're drawing art on the sidewalk, you're an artist, and then you're a different people view you as a totally different person. Is that right?
It's probably the most effective means of outreach I've ever done, and not just because I did it, but it just draws people in. The curiosity gets the best of them. and they
Because you
want to know.
can't see it from a distance. You got to kind of get up there to look at
Yeah,
it.
and there's something about a craft that when you watch someone do it, you get mesmerized. It's
Yeah.
like, oh wow, look how he did this, or how he's turning a bowl, or he's someone who's making a pot of on a wheel, like with clay. And there's something that grips you, and your mind starts to think. And but generally, curiosity just gets the best of people, and they see women that are dressed modestly, and they see men with big beards, and like, what is this about? So the curiosity again just seems to get the best of them, that draws them over.
Mm.
So how long does it take you to draw something like that?
It's taken about 5 hours or so. They take a
Wow.
long time, and they only last as long as there's no rain.
Wow.
So you always get to do a new one, which is nice.
So you don't do them in Seattle, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, or Portland in the wintertime. It's been a little while. Gabriel and I traveled on our bicycles throughout 9 countries in Europe, and we did one in Budapest and one in Vienna as well. That was pretty neat.
Bern.
Oh yeah, Bern, Switzerland.
Switzerland.
Yeah, that's right.
Wow, right down in the heart of Anabaptist country.
Yeah, we were in Zurich as well. Yeah.
But just, I mean, throw out some other ideas to just get people kind of creatively thinking about how to do outreach and breaking out of the molds. Because even ourselves, we could get into these routines
I
and
know.
certain questions and signs. But yeah, there's something to just really having a willing heart to be led by the Holy Spirit. And as you're going about your day, just doing your regular activities, just really be yielded to the Holy Spirit. And if He's just highlighting somebody like makes eye contact with you, and like especially like if you're a woman and you got like all your like modestly dressed children and they're so well behaved, and you know there's people in the supermarket that probably wanting to ask questions, and if they're making eye contact, you can just be like, hey, it looks like you want to say something, you know. And just there's something about organic conversations,
That's right,
just the
yeah.
way they just can kind of just start with what is happening like in your sphere at that time. And I've had really nice conversations that way. But then there's like more routine things, like you can ask people, like if there's a group of guys and I just want to ask them about their purity, and I'll start a conversation. I got this from a brother. It's like, I'm sure you guys would like to get married someday. Well, can you share some ideas with me of how you can start loving your wife now? Just prepping them in their hearts and minds to think about like, oh yeah, like I am going to be married someday, and why don't I? Why am I not acting like it now, just through fidelity and just making wise decisions in life?
So as you've met people, as you've met a lot of people all across. I mean, you two all
Yeah.
across Europe.
I was in Africa for about 4.5 years.
Africa.
And then most of the rest has been in different cities in the
You've been in
States.
Israel too, right?
I haven't been to Israel.
You haven't?
No.
Okay.
India for a month.
Okay.
But that's a short time.
Okay.
So meeting people all across the world.
Sure.
If you meet somebody in Africa or in Germany or in Switzerland or France or whatever, like what do you were probably in a state where you could have stayed and discipled somebody for a while if you needed
Yeah.
to, but like what's your game plan if you make a convert in the middle of Africa or somewhere in France, or like what happens?
I think the most, at least for myself, the most important thing that God has taught me over the years is having a love for people. Because if people, it's like it's one thing to, like, you can reach out to people, you can be very disciplined and do a lot of things like Paul says, but if you don't, you don't have love, there's not going to have the same fruit. And so I think and I remember when I read Nabil Qureshi's book about seeking Allah, finding Jesus, one thing, he had a heart to want to help Christians to understand Muslims on a deeper level, to know how to effectively minister to them, because he knew it was going to take many years for many of them to come to Christ and all that they have to lose, because the main question for them a lot of times was, what's the cost? But and a lot of Christians might not realize like the harder things that Jesus said sometimes about losing your father or mother, or loving God more than in their context, it might have been similar to the Jews in Jesus's days, because they would be excommunicated from their community,
Yeah.
persecuted, put in, whatever,
Shunned.
shunned. And are these people like wanting me to sign on the dotted line on a Gideon's, or are they actually willing to receive me into their family? And if I get thrust out, if there's life, and so it's with different people in varying degrees, um, and but I think uh, love is definitely an important thing, and commitment to being willing. Not, I mean, I know sometimes when you witness to someone, it's just a passing thing, but nowadays you can actually get their phone number
Yeah.
and keep in contact with people and follow up. Um, and I know um, there's one book I've been reading recently. It's called The Cry for Spiritual Fathers and Mothers by Larry Kreider. I think he's from Lancaster County. But just being a willingness to care about people, and in a sense, father, brother, whatever it is their needs are,
Mm.
and just see how God's Spirit leads from there, and in your relationship with them.
There's a lot of uh, immigrants. They have like migrant farmers, right?
Hmm.
They work other people's fields. They sow seeds, then they move on to the next, and they move on to the next. In some regards, I think our community was. We would always have a communal house, numerous community houses throughout the United States, but not always the same amount of people would be there. It might be like Gabriel and I are passing through for a week or for a couple months, and then we travel on. And so at times we just didn't really have, we sowed a lot of seeds, but we didn't have our own like farm per se, if you want
Right.
to keep it
Yeah.
like that. Because the community largely did a lot of evangelism and traveling. And when I look at the scriptures, I see specific men and people that go out and plant churches, but largely the whole community is not constantly traveling or just semi-nomadic, you know. And so over the years, like we've just enjoyed the battle. We've loved being on the front lines, witnessing to people, building relationships, and keeping. I mean, now that I have a phone, I got a phone for the first time when I was 45, so that was just 10 years ago, and I've really used it for the sake of the kingdom. And my contact list is huge from around the world, and I'd like to check up on people. I like to see how they're doing. Now, I can't be in all places at all times. I'm not God, but I could do what I can with the resources He's given me, and He's ultimately like we water and we plant and cultivate, but obviously He's going to give the increase. So it's like that widow that just did what she could. That's all I. There's only just so much that we can do, but and that we don't want to flog ourselves if we're not. This guy over here doing like gigantic podcasts or just like massive communities or bringing so many people to faith. I mean, he's given every man and woman a measure of his spirit for the profiting of both the body and for humanity at large, right?
I think our ministry was very specific, generally to single people, but occasionally we would, have pretty influential and married people's lives as well. But
Mm-hmm.
generally it was, we would find people who were pretty like-minded, who
Mm-hmm.
were just wanted more out of life than just to be like a wage slave, and they wanted victory, over just their flesh, and wanted to do something radical for the gospel in their lifetime. So it would draw unique people to us, and then there's where we kind of did our discipleship, taking somebody under our wing and giving them an environment to just go really deep in prayer and studying the scriptures. Like when I first joined the road ministry, like I had like it was like the ark, Noah's ark, just like troubled seas all around, and I had like this safety net, just godly people that would really just pour into me every day. I was living with them, having Bible studies, literature, had the environment to just be praying and reading from the rising of the sun to the going down of the same, and I just got prepared to go out and engage in the witness. And so like we would provide like opportunities for that. And even like this one guy we met over in Jerusalem, he just took such an immense interest in us.
Yeah.
He flew us over to the Netherlands to meet his community, and he wanted to know what it was like to share the gospel like the way we do, and maybe live off of a bicycle. So we took him on a trip from Barcelona, Spain, all the way down to the southern tip of Spain, and then took a ferry into Morocco and continued the journey into Morocco. It was like a 1,400-mile trip, and he just got to see how we lived from a day-to-day basis and how we engaged with just strangers and how we share the gospel with people. So that would be kind of like a form of how we maintain relationships and disciple people. Like if they were really interested, if they seemed like they were a fit, then we would get very close, personal, and really bring them under our wing on like a just daily basis.
So we didn't solicit people though. It was, if they had a desire to be a part of what we're doing, we just didn't want people to make hasty decisions. Sometimes we turn people away because you could see that they were maybe wanting to do it for the wrong reason.
So I was going to ask, like, how quickly did you allow somebody in? Like,
Yeah.
did you just overnight say, well, hey,
Generally not. That was rare. Because it's like it's not like you're inviting someone into a Sunday service. You're inviting them into the intimacy of your life, like your family, for instance. You're like moving them in the room next door.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we wanted to make sure that their decisions were led by the Spirit and not coercion or anything like that.
There's probably a number of factors depending on where their heart was, where they were at in their walk, with the Lord. Just even their circumstances, their living circumstances. Sometimes it takes you quite a while to unravel, divest yourself from other commitments and things like that.
Yeah.
And then, just your personality type. Some it could have taken like a year and a half longer. Like myself, it was like about a week.
Yeah,
and
me
I was
too.
like, I'm in,
There's
these are my
exceptions.
people.
There were exceptions.
Yeah.
With exceptional, when you have exceptional sacrifices, then I guess,
Yeah.
like this guy's serious. I was throwing $2,000 stereos over bridges and TVs and relinquishing everything and just cleaning out shop, all these idols in my life. I saw that none of that was going to I was going to lose my soul. What shall I profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his soul? And I thought my soul was way more valuable than the riches of Egypt, which are temporary. You don't get to partake of that for eternity.
One thing I would say real briefly is because you asked about Africa, and I noticed that there was a very different field of like being a part of the Sojourners in America, and because we were modeled after the Book of Acts, where we would share everything, live communally, and seek God's kingdom first, and seeking that first. But when we were in the context of Africa, it was so drastically different. We had to re-examine different beliefs and practices that we had from like first world America, where we could God would provide all this abundant good food by checking dumpsters, or housing that was just available, and we could just fix them up and do a work trade, and not needing a whole lot of finances. But when we were in Africa, it was very different, because sharing everything, you're coming out of America, and they're like, yeah, I would like to share everything with a bunch of people from America. They literally have nothing, and so then it causes you to okay, well, how would we develop a communal example, an early Christian model of how to live, and we and it's already been evangelized where we were, at least in Malawi, Africa. So there was probably 70 to 75% of the country was some form of Christianity, and then the other 20% maybe Muslim, and then maybe 5% various tribes. And so I think after being there for a while and starting to understand the culture and the people, and just seeing how how we ourselves in our ministry weren't really trained to be church planners. We were evangelists, and were able to do a lot of Bible studies and build people up so that they knew their Bible, they knew what the Scripture says, and about turning from ungodliness, and and how to just learning how to seek God's kingdom first in the context of where they are, and also learning how to hear listen to His Spirit, in line with the scriptures, and just having a relationship, a living
So you were
relationship.
more doing like a level up,
What do you
not so
mean?
much not so much bringing somebody to Christ, but just helping the Christians level up. Or,
In a sense, like we were wanting to just help people to learn how to walk with God on their own, and also how like there was people that had already somehow come to faith in one form or another, but also I think one of the things we were trying to help people is to grow, because like you're taught certain things in different churches that might be off here or off
right,
there,
yeah.
and so but as workers, you're able to have an avenue to, by example, teach them about, like divorce and remarriage would be something that their main Bible translation, like the King James would be the old in America, like the older, more well trusted by maybe more conservative communities, and which relates to the Greek and the Hebrew and all that. But then in Chichewa and Malawi, where we were, it's like they have one older version that most people read, but it's harder for the younger generation to understand because some of the words are like Shakespearean African language, and so it's like, and so you're dealing with this, you have this younger generation, and then you have a bunch of these established churches, and their translation of Matthew about divorce and remarriage is the cause of adultery, it says in their translation. And so this is the passed down understanding from long, long ago. And then you're dealing with like, okay, well, not only in the King James, but in the original Greek, we're dealing where the cause is about something that's premarital, like fornication. And so you're having to introduce these concepts about redefining divorce and remarriage, but the Bible that they've had, and so it gets into having to explain certain things to a
Right.
certain amount of people, and then learning understand even in the context of culture, like how they define marriage, like what does consist of a marriage in Africa. And we were running into difference of opinions in our church in America and then in Africa, where it's like they have three cultural acceptances for a legitimate marriage. One would be dowry. There's an arrangement between the families. Another would be a registered Christian church, and the other would be a government wedding. But if people just say they're married, even if they, and if they get together and they have kids, basically they're just shacking up in African culture. But like some churches here might say, well, if they made a vow before God, then they're not married. But and so we were running into some of that. Yeah.
Very complex things when you get close to people.
Yeah, I think about that verse where he says, "Pray therefore the Lord of the harvest that He send forth more laborers into the harvest." And what I've been thinking is like we really need to pray that the Lord would send forth more leaders into the harvest, because you could have all these willing workers, but if you don't have solid leadership to know how to organize the willing workers, it just boils over into chaos sometimes. And also, like, he's teaching his disciples to go out to all the nations and make disciples. It's like, well, go out to all the nations and plant churches. So for us, we thought like one or two people were harvest at times, you know, and we weren't really trained in how to like literally raise up whole communities. And so we didn't eventually see that the model was very reproducible, and if you can't pass it on to the second generation, then your movement stops. So there was great intentions, and the desire was there, and I've yet to see any group of people largely that were so committed and so driven. Um, like the sacrifice was unlike anything I've really seen before.
So what's your dream for Portland? Like like this is all going to change, right?
Sure.
Like this,
Yeah,
you're gonna it's going to be a whole. I mean, you're on a whole new frontier.
Well, we're allowing God to show up because we know we can't do anything, and I think that's a really healthy place to be in. Too often we could hedge ourselves in by our community, like everything's so padded, and we don't take any risks. And we're in a position and a place now that we feel a real leading, and we see the doors opening up for us in Portland And for those of you who don't know Portland, there's a lot happening there. There really is. I mean, there's hearts are moving. We've been in and out of Portland over the years for at least over a decade, and you could see like the cultural landscape is shifting because I believe the secular myth is caving in on itself. All of the radical antichrist teachings and lifestyles aren't sustaining their deep needs, which is intimacy with one another and especially with their Father in heaven. So being a presence there and seeing like other people who have gone before and kind of laying down some strong foundational stones, we hope to build in a place that we're expectant that God has got to show up, because if He doesn't, then we're in trouble. But and I think like with Psalm 23, it's all about the trust that the sheep have in the shepherd, and it's his reputation on the line, not mine. Like it's not my church, it's not our church that we're trying to build. It's like we just want to be a living witness and a presence. And do you think the disciples knew what they were going to do? Like some of them were just really bumbling fellows, but they had a love for God, and He did something with them and through them that like we get to read the story. Like Peter didn't have the best testimony all the time, but he was zealous and he was just like right there. And once the Holy Spirit fell upon them, they were converted and great things happened. So I think if we just keep our hearts in an open, honest, broken place, we could find ourselves in situations that we'd never imagined Him doing. And again, I just think too often we're not willing to step out of the ship. Like, who wants to step out of the comfort zone in the midst of a cyclone? But Peter did. And he found himself doing the impossible as long as he kept his eyes on Messiah. So I know that could be scary. That could be um, unreasonable or look reckless, especially to the structure and order of Anabaptism. I get it. Um, but we are just put in this situation due to some circumstances, and we're doing the best that we can right now. And I think the Almighty knows that, and we're expecting Him to do great things again because it's His reputation. And, even Moses. I was thinking about this recently. Moses realized that if the Almighty was to wipe out the children of Israel and raise up a whole new people through Moses, he's like, what are the nations going to say about that? You know what I mean? So like he put that on him. Like, this is your people. You brought us out. You did all of this. Sure, they messed up something awful by sinning with the golden calf. But it was like, what does God say? Like, oh wow, it's almost like you kind of got me in a sense. But it's His desire to do like great things because we serve a God that's gigantic. And I think we sometimes hedge Him in from doing exceeding abundant above all that we ask and think because we got things too padded and comfortable. So not necessarily by choice, but by situation, we're in a position in place where He's really got to show up.
So where? Okay, good.
So your question is what is our vision for Portland?
Or your dream?
And dream for Portland.
Let's go bigger than the vision. Let's go to the dream.
Yeah. Right.
Well, too often you could sit around and dream. I think vision is like that's important too.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, I think our vision for ministry has shifted a little bit from how we've operated in the times past and to like go into all the world. Like that was kind of like our mind frame. It's just like we've got little base camps, and from there, this base of operations, we would just travel all over the country, even different parts of the world, like sowing seed and just looking for the remnant, and the lost sheep and those who are hungering and thirsting after righteousness. We would, find them scattered throughout, but generally didn't have the greatest infrastructure to bring back people into small amounts of people. And we're just kind of affecting the minority. And so we've traveled all over the country and the world and largely receiving like hospitality. And something that has been highlighted within like the last year and a half is when you read the scriptures, you do see in the New Testament, in the Gospels, and in the book of Acts, and throughout the epistles, that these godly men weren't like these austere prophets living in a cave,
Right.
on the outskirts of town. and then coming in and just being a mouthpiece for God. Like in the New Testament, there's just a lot of activity happening in people's homes. They're bringing people in, and they've got them around their tables, and they're introducing them to their families, and they're
Yeah.
demonstrating heaven meeting earth in the form of the kingdom here on earth as it is in heaven, through just abundance and sacrifice and generosity and things like that. And I think there's just been an increased desire for us to have like this stable place to bring people into, to demonstrate that, and to also have a place to receive people, so we can, from there just give a little bit of a prototype or a model of how you can do urban ministry in effective ways.
Right.
Yeah, so that's kind of the dream, is to have like a community house developing a healthy spiritual rhythm, like having a good balance of, just living out a sanctified, consecrated spiritual life, with one another, but also just maintaining the responsibilities of having like a house and a job and a way to just kind of like fuel this dream and this vision.
It's kind of like we can also have a cross section. I don't know if cross section is the right word, but cross intersection of ministries, because we know people that have come out of plain backgrounds, for example, that like maybe were formerly Amish or Mennonite, but are still like very tied into those communities that have so much to offer from growing up and being influenced by them. Like they have solid families, they have solid communities of families. They know how to homeschool. They have like, they know about modesty and all sorts of wonderful things, and they have something to offer, especially to a place like Portland. And so like we have this outpost, and we're like, look, we have friends that and families that we know, and if they want to come out and they want to, you know, get tied into ministry there and have someone to help them, and just to see what it's like. It's like we can be there for that, and then being connected to other believers there that are not Anabaptists. It's like we know people who God has come into their lives out of great darkness and transformed their lives, and it's like meeting people like that, and just kind of like helping believers meet other believers where God's Spirit is working in their lives, and just kind of like helping, because it's like, what is the body of Christ really? When you get down to it, it's like where is God? What is the Spirit doing? Where is He working? And learning how to be workers together, to help people find repentance, to be dedicating their lives to Christ. It's like, so in a way Portland is like, it's this possibility of a lot of working together of a lot of different ministries where we're hoping can be interwoven together for the good of most fruitful, I'll say that.
So go ahead.
We're not really wanting to compromise convictions and things, because we see a lot of really good things in people that are part of the Sunday-centric church model in Portland. There's things obviously I couldn't agree with, but we were in Egypt some years ago, and I was asking about talking to these missionaries that were there. They were doing work among the Bedouins, and I asked them basically like, what is the success rate here in a sense? And I think Americans are really big on statistics, and I do this stuff. I want to know like the effect that you're having. And he asked me how long it took me to become a Christian. I said, well, 25 years. He said, well, we need to allow them that much time too. And so too often it's just like, where a person's at right now doesn't mean that's where they'll be next year or next month or tomorrow. So I think like we need to have more patience to realize that we're on a journey, and the Father knows that, and He's crafting things in people's hearts. So being in Portland, I'm hoping that we're like Goshen, like where the children of Israel had light in their dwellings, and meanwhile there's all this gross Egyptian darkness, but there's a sanctified place where I think the word Goshen has to do with nearness, and Joseph put the children of Israel there so that they could be near to Joseph. And so like the nearness of God to His people in the midst of a real corrosive place like Egypt is kind of, I guess, what we're hoping to create there. And if there first be a willing mind, we're willing, we're here. We don't want to forsake the assembling of the saints together. We don't want to raise up a coup against other types of people that aren't doing it like us. But I think we lived in a highly committed community that was very isolated from we were in the midst of the streets and talking with people, but there still was a bubble that we were living in. And I see a lot of the, the damage that that brings, because you have this potential to feel that no one's really living up to the biblical standards, and you're like the only Christian. You think you're like Elijah almost. And he's like, I got some thousands of people reserved unto me here. Like, you're not the only one. And not that we necessarily went around thinking we're the only one, but when you go around and you travel as much as we do or did and still do, and you just don't see like people coming to similar understandings, you kind of think to yourself like, wow, I mean, not that I'm like this elitist guy or among an elitist group, but we're simply trying to do this, and it doesn't seem like anyone else is even getting the basic 101 aspects of the Sermon on the Mount and other type things of that nature. So, and then you see Anabaptists, and they're amazing in their own right, but they have lost the biblical plot of what it means to be a light in the midst of darkness. I mean, they're afraid to be around cities. They're in the country. They want to be the quiet of the land, some of them. And personally, I feel it's criminal to be given so much wisdom, understanding, knowledge about child rearing and all of what that culture has done for them, and to hide it underneath a bushel in the country is, I think, a lot of them will be held accountable for it, really, because unto whomsoever much is given, much will be required. And so hopefully that could be a bit of a jump start to be like, yeah, how can we be being more active? But here's another thing. What is the success rate that Anabaptists have wherewith they actually get converts outside of their culture? Because that will tell you how healthy your movement is. Like, you could keep Anabaptists in Anabaptism, but why is it they're not getting converts from, like, I'll call them the English, right? Like, why is that? Because the gospel should be available to all. And I can't think of a more diverse group than Jews and Gentiles living together in the first century. I mean, just the fireworks show must have been going off, because here's a people that had a tradition that was ancient and old, that just goes way back. And here are these heathens that are being filled with the Spirit, like Cornelius. He's a centurion. The guy's like probably a rough dude. He's an like he leads a multitude of men, and he's the guy that gets chosen to come into the fold like this. And the disciples are like, what are you doing? You went to men uncircumcised and you ate with them. Like, we don't roll like that. It's not how it works here. But Peter, again, it was showed like slay and eat, as well. Not so. Like, I'm not supposed to do that, and the tides can turn. Whereas like in old times, you had to be circumcised to be a part of the people of the Almighty. Now it's like you have to follow all the ways and traditions of Jacob Ammon and Menno Simons. Like, that's how you come into the fold. And I think it's tragic that the only people that are increasing largely Anabaptism is by birth. They're breeding disciples and not making them. And I think that's a question where a lot of the Anabaptists has to stop and look and say, why isn't this appealing? And it could be more like sometimes a living history museum to, like, most Christians have no idea who the Anabaptists are. They think they're like first, like Billy Graham, or like, because I think he was Baptist, or like the first Baptist church on the corner. I have to like, no, this is something different. They were persecuted both by Protestants and Catholics and the Radical Reformation. They have no clue about the history of Anabaptism. And then Amish people, when you think about them, they're an enigma to a lot of the world, but they're not known as evangelical people. They're known for their baked meats. They make great food and desserts. They're known for furniture. They're known for their craftsmanship. They're known that if the plug gets pulled on all of this, we better find some Amish, because they know how to live without all of this. Right?
Yeah,
Farm
they're ahead of us
raising,
in that
right?
game.
But they're not known as a people that have just turned the world upside down through evangelism. And the question is, why is that? What happened that they lost the very focal point of the whole foundation of their movement? This man at Kingdom Fellowship was recently asking the question, and he said, why isn't more Anabaptists dying on the mission field? And his answer was largely like parents don't want to let kids go on the mission field, largely in great number. Or maybe they just don't want to go on the mission field because, you know, I'm preparing to get married and therefore I can't go. There's probably a lot of reasons for it, but they are a fair amount of people that do go on the mission field, and I champion that, and I'm thankful for that, and I hope that they could be a pioneering force that could really create shockwaves, because I believe there's a youth movement going on in Christian circles and throughout the United States that we see. There is a revival happening, whether people want to acknowledge it or not. Even in Europe, it's called the quiet revival. Like things are being stirred up there, and again, because the culture is falling in on itself.
So how, like, have you taken any steps to tap into that quiet revival? Like, I mean, any aggressive steps, or are you, like, if it's happening, um, like I recently heard the same thing with the, like, George Whitfield and the couple people there that surrounded that movement.
Yeah.
Like, they didn't create the movement.
Yeah.
The movement was happening.
Yeah.
They came in and actually, some of them probably co-opted the movement.
Sure.
It was actually a work of God, and I'm trying to remember who preached that, "Sinners in the hand of an angry God."
Oh, Jonathan Edwards. Yeah.
Jonathan Edwards seemed to have been a sincere preacher there that was riding that wave.
Sure. Yeah.
Some of the later ones may not have been as sincere, but they co-opted it.
Sure.
And I think, in my take is that there are spiritual predators, if you want to put it that way, that are going to co-opt this movement.
Sure.
How can we do that instead? And we don't want to co-opt it, but we
Yeah.
definitely want to direct it.
Well, let me ask a question. How driven to prayer is the Anabaptist for revival? Because I've been among young people that are they love their cities. They're not hiding in the country. They like go into the midst and they witness and they share and they pray. And you hear these young people's hearts for their generation. And it is so moving. I think all of heaven stops to listen to these kids pray sometimes. And like, where are the young people? Because if you do a Bible study throughout Scripture, you look at Scripture and see who God uses. It's like He uses old people, Moses and what have you. But like you'll see like real key players: David, Solomon, Samuel. The child grew, and the Lord was with him, and He let none of his words fall to the ground. Um, you see Jeremiah; he's buddy youth, and he's like, "Don't say that. Like I'm going to send you to the nations." And again, look at the founding of fathers of Anabaptism. They're in their 20s, 20 years old. Do we allow the Anabaptist youth to step up and foster a movement? Because I think if you want to see your youth more active in ministry, you have to let them run with it. And I like to say that some of the youth, they have a zeal without knowledge because they don't have a lot of life skills and experience. But the sin of the aged is that they have knowledge and no zeal. So you need the youth to row the ship, but you need the gray-headed to steer it, to help with that. That there would be a partnership. It's not one against the other. It's like you have something that I don't, and vice versa. And I think too often we don't value the dreams and visions of young people and come alongside with them. And then we wonder why they're not really interested in biblical matters and owning the faith for themselves. We wonder why they're so wrapped up in sexual immorality and why they're just into big trucks and cowboy boots and all of nationalism and such like that, because they don't have anything that they could really somewhat call their own, that they could foster and build among their peers. And I think that's so important that Anabaptists lock into the potential young leaders and pour into them, because they're going to be the next generation, whether you like it or not. They're going to rise up and take the helm eventually. So it makes sense to start out young. Like, give them responsibility. Ask them, what are the dreams that you dream about? What kind of movement do you want to be a part of? Or are you just kind of like, this is what we do? I really don't know why we do it, but it's just how we do it. And yeah, I would just like to see more like investment in young people.
One thing I'd like to say too is I would really love to see like something spring up out of the Mennonites or Amish or Anabaptist communities having a really a good effect in places like Portland. I would love to be workers together with them.
Yeah.
And and I, of my own admitting, like we're lacking like something to be able to receive what is actually what I see is going on among young people, and all I've been able to do
In what
myself.
way? Like, explain that a little more. We
Well,
are lacking.
okay, I mean, I like more recent in the last year or so, I was um, through a friend found out about this church called the Antioch movement, and just beginning to being in a city that I wasn't familiar with, and just trying to find some sort of spiritual Christian fellowship, and having gone and just seeing a lot of younger people there that were effectively, like, you could see it in their lives, in their conversation. They loved each other. They had a zeal for God. They wanted fully surrendered lives to God. They had come out of darkness. You could talk to them, hear their testimonies. And this was part of a network of churches that started in the late 90s, early 2000. And like, I didn't necessarily agree with everything they believe and everything they practice, but what I saw was they were available in these places and they had a heart for the people, and because of that, God was using them. They knew how to pray, they knew how to read the Bible, they loved God, and they loved people. And they wanted to, and they wanted others to come to God and come into repentance, come into a life surrendered to Christ. And I was visiting my parents in Seattle to help out, but I hadn't really spent much time there, as far as like doing evangelism, since I was 21, or I didn't know that. And I had asked someone, well, do you know any churches in Seattle? He's like, yeah, my cousin, he leads worship in a church there, and so I ended up going there, and it was a similar thing. I was just going to their churches and seeing a similar thing. Like, they have a ministry that's available and working in those cities, that is ready to receive people and care about them, and they have something to bring them to. And that's and in Portland too, there's other churches there that aren't necessarily a part of that movement, like Bridgetown or others, but you see that people that have ministries, that have people that care and have a zeal, like, God is using them because they're there and they're available, and and they're willing to pray and listen, and so and I think I'm just trying to learn, like, how can I be ready, to either work with people together because they're available and they have something I can jump into to try to help with what is actually going on, because I've been, through like visiting some of these places that I wouldn't have visited before. I've been visiting them and seeing a lot of young people that are hungering, they're thirsting, they're looking for something. And it's like, just being available and having something that's like, you know, uh, and being in a place to receive people, I think God will use you, and so.
The danger, though, is for people to step back and see, like, yeah, well, they're getting used, but they're really just wolves in sheep's clothing. And that's there. But you could totally dismantle and dismiss the movement based on, like, the outward appearance. Like, look at this guy. If he was a prophet, he would have known what manner of woman this is. It's like, yeah, he knew exactly what kind of woman that was. That she was broken and you guys aren't. And that's who he had respect unto. And that's who went away with the healing. And outwardly, it didn't appeal to them. So you could say, yeah, like, what's going on? The Spirit's moving in their midst. Sure, maybe, who knows? But why is she still wearing yoga pants and half naked? Like, I question that too. I have no idea how that works. Like, they're moving in such power at times, and they're being effective way more than other people I know that are just dressed modestly. And I'm hoping that as these people, like, again, we need to have patience with people, that the Lord is going to bring them into a more perfect understanding, and in hopes that it's going to come out in the wash. But we could just have a real critical pharisaical eye, and I definitely have. And I don't want to come to a place where I'm just always casting down the work in people's lives, because some of them come out of such gross darkness that none of these, like, plain people could even understand, because they grew up in wholesome families. Like some of these people, like, whoa, the fact that they even profess to be Christians to any degree is an absolute miracle, you know. And so I don't want to quench the smoking flax or break the bruised reed. Um, I don't want to suffer compromise in my life. Like, I think it's important that we uphold and maintain godly standards and preach and live holiness, but not to be holier than now, because we're just a smoke in his nose if that's the case. And we all need to check ourselves to see whether or not that's been the case. And, you know, but I think we're all just learning so much, even in our as we grow older. You know, when you're young, you think you got it all figured
Yeah,
out,
yeah.
right? But it's good to because it challenges what you believe, and we need to have our beliefs challenged because we're not always right. I mean, if you think about it, like, look at the disciples. Look who he chose. You know what I mean? Like, where's the ultra orthodox, guys that studied in yeshiva from Jerusalem? You know, all of these guys are probably in their late teens, early 20s, largely, seeing only one of them was married, and Jewish culture married young. Um, their Messiah's only 30 years old, sorry. Um, and like these guys just come in all dusted out from the field and sleeping in the
Smelling
Mount
like
of
stinky
Olives.
fish.
Yeah. And it's like this is the ragtag crew. Like, again, who takes wild branches and puts them into a good tree? That's not how we do things, you know. So I think too often I see it myself. Like, if I was God, this is how it should be done, and we'll do it that way. It's orderly, and it seems like that's how it should work. You know, Paul should go to the Orthodox religious Jews in Jerusalem, and Peter should go to the more like farmhands and agricultural workers. It's like, no, I'm going to take Peter the fisherman and stick him in Jerusalem, and Paul's going to go to the Gentiles. Like, what in the world is going on? Like, that's not how it should be done. Paul knows how to relate to the religious Jews. Peter, he's probably more fit for the Gentiles. And that kind of thinking, like, it could really mess with you. Like, I might be pretty off in the way that I think about things. But when you really study the way that the Almighty does things, it's so contrary. Like the widow, yeah, she just cast in a few mites. Like, she gave more than everyone. How do you figure? Like, this guy just dropped in, 10,000 shekels. It's like, no, she gave everything. And that's just how his mind works. And too often we don't have that mind frame. So, Hector, I'm curious to ask you a question. And the question is, you've heard about our community. We've sat in fellowship before as we've sojourned through State College. What was it that got into your heart? Like, I want to interview these men and these brothers and find out what makes them tick, or what was in your heart to bring us on to your podcast.
Well, I just don't see. I meet a lot of people
Uh-huh.
and a lot of interesting people, but I don't see a lot of people that are so just all out committed to doing whatever God asks them to do, whenever, wherever. And probably one of the bigger things that stands out to me is your commitment to financial insecurity. Because that is something that I feel like the Anabaptists are terrible at.
Sure, yeah.
Like, we have all kinds of anti-Jesus teachings, that are, people are saying, well, you need to have a retirement fund. You need to have medical insurance. They rename it. They call it something else. But you don't have 401ks. You just have another way of, or a lot of them are actually going to 401ks.
Yeah.
So I just see all this. I feel like it's wickedness. And I've seen that in your community, that you're going to the opposite extreme of just. I mean, leaving for New York from Iowa with $20 in your pocket? Is that what you said, Gabriel? Like, how does that work?
Again,
well,
like,
he's faithful. That's how it works.
God's reputation's on the line.
Yeah.
So, you don't want to put yourself in stupid situations just to, like, I want to see if you can do this kind of thing. But he made to us, again, exceeding great and precious promises. And if he can't just take care of us, then what does that say about him as a father? You know, I think too often we're way too self-sufficient. And that's not to say that we should be filled with sloth, but I mean, for us, even in Portland, like we don't hold down a 40-hour work week. We do some tree work, we do painting. Ellie hopes to eventually do a creperie.
Oh, what?
You know, crepes.
French crepes.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really?
Like
That sounds like fun.
at farmers markets and things like that. We'll see, but he's just always working out creative and interesting ways to make sure that we're provided for. And when you live a life like that, you just learn to trust. Like even if things aren't working out, you know he saves the best wine for last. So he he comes in at the ninth hour. Um,
And I like to think of it, like God's saying, Jesus says, "Come unto me, all you that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take your yoke upon you, and learn of me, for I'm meek and lowly in heart, and you'll find rest unto your soul." And it's like he's got a business for us to be a part of. The Great Commission is an occupation.
it is.
And
It's a
I think
word.
that can be so forgotten about and overlooked, and even somewhat even lightly esteemed.
Yeah.
And so if he is an employer and we are about our Father's business, and he says, like, for all the nations of the world, they are thinking about these securities, food and clothing and shelter. But if we give ourselves to him, seek him first in his righteousness, the things that we have need of will be added unto us. And we've really just experienced that firsthand in very miraculous ways, that he is faithful to provide for us. So that relieves a lot of pressure and burden off of us. Even just coming into Portland, we saw the doors
Oh, wow.
fly wide open.
Amazing.
And just highly reduced rental price, living with pretty solid believers wanting to facilitate us in our vision for outreach there in Portland. And then not even really looking something. We meet a guy who has like a construction handyman business, and it's like he just offers us work from time to time, and other people that hear about us that we do different things, work with our hands for the things that we have need of, and they want to support us and get provide work for us, and they see we do a good job. So but we still have time to be about our Father's business as well.
Yeah. Some of what you talked about is what the Lord referred to as just like a Gentile way of life. For after all these things that the Gentiles seek, it's like we're separated, we're consecrated, we're set apart unto him. We belong to him. We're his sons, we're his daughters. So I think there needs to be a reevaluation of chapter 6 in Matthew there, because it's almost a whole half chapter that speaks about the impossibility of serving both Mammon and the Almighty. Like they're two competing gods. They really are. And the scriptures talk about this the deceitfulness of riches. And our hearts are deceitful on top of that. So you're dealing with two very deceptive things. Our own hearts, in the way that we reason away some of the harder sayings of Messiah. And then we're dealing with just riches. There's something deceitful about them, where you trust in them. In fact, if I understand right, the Hebrew word or Aramaic word for mammon, has to do with trustworthy. And that's what, like, people, you really do put your trust in it. And I find myself doing that sometimes too. If you get a little bit low, you're like, oh no, what am I going to do? And we could be thinking, what am I going to eat? What am I going to drink? What am I going to put on?
How am I going to pay insurance?
Yeah, how am I going to cover rent or whatever? And it's like, wow, you get to the point where, like, how did Moses provide for a few million people or so in the wilderness? Like, you think he had all those logistics worked out? Not even close. It was just like, stood before Pharaoh, let my people go, and like all this is on him. He's got to carry it. And at times they thought of stoning him, because if a man's not getting his ends met for his family, he's going to turn to the leadership, and he's going to get pretty aggressive with him. And Moses is like, what am I going to do here? Like, did I bear all these people, like, as a nursing father or mother? And so, I mean, he takes us through valleys and mountaintops, and he proves us. And the one thing is, we have a testimony, much like the children of Israel in the wilderness, and much like the disciples when they were sent out. They were brought into account. When I sent you without anything, did you lack anything? You said, no, we lack nothing. When the children of Israel wandered through the desert for 40 years, their feet didn't swell. I think Nehemiah, it says they lack nothing. And yeah, we really have a testimony of his faithfulness. And that looks pretty crazy to people, but I personally want to be careful about serving mammon for the short time that I have. Like, money's renewable. You could get that back whenever. You can't get your time back. Your time isn't renewable. So, you know, it's like you lost yesterday, you never get it back. You lost $100. I'll work hard and make 200 tomorrow. You know, so I think we have to really take deep inventory, because I know some people really champion the Sermon on the Mount, but you know, I don't know if they really want to go deep in that one. You know, because I think it's going to get really deep, and they're going to realize where their allegiance lies a lot of times. Because where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. I think also where your time is, that's where your heart is also. Because you're going to do the thing that you esteem most, and that's where the work of your hands is going to be. And I understand we have families to support. As single men, we don't have as much responsibility in that way, but still, like, our life should be looking way different than the Gentiles in provision.
Yeah.
Reading, praying, fasting, witnessing, like, where is that largely in our lives? Like, take honest inventory of it.
Yeah, I mean, one thing Jesus said was, blessed are they who hunger and thirst for righteousness. And I think that was, at the point where God began to deal with me. In my life, I was taught something drastically different than what Jesus was trying to put the focus on. It was like, you go to school, you go to college, you get your business established, you get your money established, and then you go out.
Yeah.
But when I had met, the Sojourners, and they had testimonies and stories, and I was reading these things for the first time, and like, I was excited, and I was like really happy to hear it, but it was scary. It was like, I want to believe this is true. Is this like a fairy tale? Is this not, and the thing is, it's Jesus saying it.
Yeah.
And when Jesus says something, it's different than when a man says it.
Yeah.
And then you're hearing testimony. People are like, yeah, I've been living this for like the last, number of years, but they're also not using it as an excuse just to like be idle. Like, there's a responsibility. And it was that Jesus said, seek you first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. So it's like the work actually is get what should be the real work is getting your life right with God first, and then it's like, I'll take care of these things, and he wants us to be first focused on, are we living right, and it's like, I'll take care of the rest, just you get these things right first, do that work, and then, but the promise isn't related to like, I'll provide these things just so you can do whatever you want. There's a responsibility along with it.
Yeah, so one of the questions that I would have had is like, how, like, something I'm very interested in as an overall principle is, how do you do missions without money? Because the American mission machine is very dependent upon lots of cash.
Well,
and I feel like that's not the way the early church operated.
No.
Right.
No.
And like, how can we replicate something similar to what the early church did? I mean, the Acts church.
Sure.
And going out without taking what? So don't take a purse, or don't take a staff.
Yeah.
Is that what Jesus told them?
One time,
Yeah.
one phase of the mission.
That's
like
a good way to
boot
put it.
camp.
One phase.
Like, wow, like,
Uh-huh.
it's kind of like, don't take a car, don't take a wallet.
Yeah.
Yeah. And watch me work, and that would only build your faith, because you would see, like, God, you would be totally reliant on him to provide everything,
Well, I
Yeah,
think
and
go ahead.
I've literally sat in missions training where the speaker is like, it's utter foolishness to go on the mission field without medical insurance. And I'm like, well, that's a little bit of a distance between that and not having any staff and no purse.
Yeah.
Like, maybe he's correct. I don't know. Like, he obviously had some reason for saying that. It's just, in my mind, I'm looking at that and saying, at face value,
Uh-huh.
that sounds like the opposite of what Jesus taught.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think of two people. I think of one, Jonah. You know, just he had just a one-line sentence or so, and he was probably one of the most successful of all preachers. Although he was a little upset about the outcome, which is crazy.
He didn't even want to be successful.
Yeah, I know, it's wild.
I know,
You know,
right?
there was no smoke and lights and no money. He was just, yeah, he went through a pretty rough time in the fish's belly for 3 days and 3 nights. And then I think of John the Baptist. He was just wholly dedicated. He's, in the wilderness eating locusts and wild honey, but yet he's so committed and people are coming to him. And there's like this national revival that's taking place. So I think like people that are going to hold the most currency are people that are really wholly given to the things of the Almighty. They're keeping themselves spotless. They're, like really walking with integrity and holiness and purity. And I think too often we can rely in the ingenuity of both like our imaginations, the work ethic that we have, and also finances. But the foundation of like intense prayer is what's usually at the helm of every movement. Like again, the people that were desiring revival in some older times and even to this present day, like that's a burden that they carry. I just don't think a lot of people in Christian circles, they just see the world as a wreck, and you could be like, it's the last days, there's going to be a great falling away. But there are people that have such a heart for revival that it's part of the rhythm of their daily petitioning and crying out to the Almighty for that. And it's like he's answering that. Whether you like it or not, it may not be in the context that you like. You may feel that you should be at the forefront of that, or this people group, or more so this congregation or that. But it's belonging to the people that have been longing for it, and they're like in birth pangs with this thing because they love people that much. I think we could get to this point where the world's just going to hell and like whatever. I'm just gonna just isolate myself and play a good defense.
Yeah.
It's like he wants us to go on the offense and take ground.
Yeah.
I mean, and not that there isn't, I'm not against using, all forms of the way that man has studied things to, overcome certain sicknesses and stuff, but also how do you integrate in that with heal the sick, cleanse the lepers?
Yeah.
Like when Jesus equipped his disciples, he also gave them power, and it says like he's not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. And, it's, the question is have, people that have those concerns, and I'm not saying I haven't, it's a gift. There's a gift of the spirit of faith and this and of those things, but is it because there's a lacking of the power to do those things, and people don't have the faith to believe in those things? Like, is it a fairy tale in their mind? That okay, that was nice for them. In the first century, that's how they lived or they did things. But we're in the 20th century, and times have changed. Is that really the way what Jesus meant?
Well, it talks about having a form of godliness but denying the power thereof.
Right.
Some people may just deny that this is even something we could tap into.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate because he said all power in heaven and earth is given unto me. So again, if we're tapped into the vine, we're abiding in the vine, we have access to that sap, where that life flow and that power could go out into us. It's sad. There's groups that just feel that all the apostles did all the work, and so we just get to ride on their on their credentials.
Of the gifts as well.
Yeah.
That's done away with.
I understand it's been greatly abused.
Yeah.
But in my name you shall cast out devils, and if you tread upon serpents and what have you, you shall tread upon serpents, and if any deadly thing bites you, we won't be felt by that, probably spiritually and physically as well.
Yeah, I've heard it that if you don't believe those things are still happening, it's because you're not close enough to the front.
Often that's where those things are happening.
Yeah.
Like places like Africa. Or,
I like to say, who gets all the ammunition? Who gets all of it? Those are on the front lines. That's why. You know what I mean? If you're just out in the bleachers, you don't get much because you're not in the game.
Skin in the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, let's detract a little bit back to your original question about yeah, how do you support missions without money? You know, like the Jews have a saying, "Well, there's no bread, there's no Torah." Like if you're not putting like food on the table, then how are people going to continue to be able to study the scriptures?
Yeah.
You know, so it's like, okay, if there's no money, how are you going to supply, you know, those who do want to go on the front lines? And I guess this is going to be a very nuanced answer because there's just so many like different ways you can look at this. But I think we're greatly affected by just living in America and being just desensitized to the opulence that we live in, you know. And I think Americans are so rich in assets, and maybe it was similar like to those in Corinth and other places. They had material assets that they could divest and they could share, and this is how they supported one another and were able to, you know, send out of their abundance, send to those who had lack. Necessarily didn't have to be financial as well, but they were, some people had big houses that they were willing to share and let some like new converts like come and live with them for a time. And or maybe they had a couple pieces of property and they no longer rented one and they let somebody else stay in there. It's just, I think the kingdom economics works differently than just the economics of this world that I think American Christians have gotten very accustomed to. And if there was just an ability to be content with food and clothing, like the scriptures say, and it's like you need shelter if you got a family as well, but like just kind of taking on a little bit of a more frugal and simple mentality, there'd be a lot more finances to go around, and you'd have a lot more time that you actually didn't even have to work for finances if you were just willing to lower your standards of living in order to support kingdom efforts.
I used to be a lot more critical of the Anabaptist riches, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah, sure.
But especially since living here at State College, I've realized that that there are actually sincere Anabaptist men that are dedicated to the kingdom and are willing to put their finances on the line.
Yeah,
That's great.
Yeah.
and that's why I said it's very nuanced, because I wouldn't I've been wrong. Like I've met doctors who make lots of money, you know, but they'll even only work like maybe 3 months or 6 months out of the year. I can't remember what it was, just to maintain their license. But while they're working, they make tons of money, but they live very humble lives, and the rest of the year they're like over in places that are just impoverished, like sharing their wealth, you know. So you gotta be careful about being, you know, overly critical in areas.
Yeah, because when you look at like the house we are living in here is owned by an Anabaptist fellow that is renting to us way below market value. Same thing with several of the houses in the community that are owned by other people that they have a heart to support the church here, so that they have bought houses here, you know, expensive housing area, and then they're renting it out below rate, so that
and that just proves my point. You have people that are gracious and generous to help others further, like your guys' mission here in State College, you know.
Yeah, if you want to be in concentrated areas and cities, it's going to cost you a lot more than the country. So, but I mean, God's not broke. He's just not. I'm sorry, you know. I think if there's like where there's some vision, there'll be provision, as they say.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, right.
Yeah, and
So as like when you were with Sojourners, was it more that everybody lived so frugally that you were able to be kind of a self-supporting community, or were the outside finances coming in?
yeah, we would work at times to support certain needs, and you know, we had
But
travels.
we weren't supported by outside sources.
No, we were not.
Like there wasn't, you didn't have
donors
that said, "Hey, you know what? We like your cause so much, we're going to dump."
No. It was all just totally faith-based. I mean, we would work at times, but
Yeah.
we just didn't give ourselves to laboring to that extent. Like really, we just felt like to study to show yourself approved. Like that takes a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of experience. Like how a student goes to college, they're studying to show their former or their future employer that yeah, I'm qualified and trained for this position. And as Christians, like yeah, we need to study the scriptures. We need to put effort. So a lot of time was put into our studies. A lot of time was put into witnessing. And one place it says, "Separate me, Paul and Barnabas, for the work that I've called them to." And so it's unfortunate, but some people just didn't see that what we were doing was work. Although, like, they would honor that among students that paid $80,000 a year to go to Penn State here or more. Yeah, try getting on your bike and riding like, you know, 2,000 miles across country and tell me that's not work. I'm not getting paid for it. That's a labor, to do that. I mean, to travel all the way across the country for an appointment that you don't even know about that's about to happen with a kid on the street that's just been crying out to the Almighty that someone would disciple him or spend time with him or share the truth with him. Like they were crying out to Paul or to the Spirit, like what was it? Paul had that vision, like, come over and help us.
Macedonian.
Yeah,
It was extreme frugality.
yeah,
Yeah,
it was.
extreme frugality.
Uh-huh.
And in our travels, I just think God put it on people's hearts. Like when we were biking through a city or biking through somewhere, there was times where people would give us, like, you could call them love offerings or
Sure,
offerings or whatever. And it was hard for me to receive those a lot of the time. But at the same time, one brother was just like, don't deny them the blessing. We met a lot of people that I think they really kind of wanted to do what we done. They appreciated the sacrifice, and somehow they wanted to support it, be a part of it, live sort of vicariously through our mission. And a way that they could do that was feel like they could give through financial support.
Right. In a lot of ways, money is the vehicle that allows people to. Well, it does two things. One is it allows people that really care to be able to feel like they can at least help that much.
Right.
But then it also allows people that are feeling guilty to kind of purchase some tickets.
Yeah.
But I think it's okay. Like I don't think that's. I mean,
They're sowing into the kingdom also.
It's like it doesn't. The principle is still there. No, even if their heart's wrong.
Yeah.
The principle is still there. They're still sowing. Like I wonder how much that work. I mean, how much that happens when people give. Maybe even out of the wrong attitude. But I mean, obviously Jesus said, this rich man that gave lots to be seen of men.
Sure.
But I think a lot of people give because they feel guilty and they want to kind of cleanse their conscience a little bit. And I don't think God is going to hold against them for giving.
He's gonna love them if they do it with a cheerful heart.
Yeah,
With a cheerful heart, for sure.
Yeah.
It's a tool, like anything. It could be abused. It could be used to hurt. But I think money is something that we need to be watchful for. But it's also something that could be a real blessing. It could help people. It could feed people. It's a difference sometimes between life and death, with food or with some kind of medical attention or what have you. Like some of these people in Africa can't afford some medication for malaria, and they die from a mosquito. I think it's been said that the most violent persecutor is taking the most lives is the mosquito. Yeah, which is kind of wild when you think. I never thought about that.
It is wild. The statistics of mosquitoes compared to bears is it isn't even close. I mean, talking about hundreds of thousands versus maybe a handful
Sure. Yeah. Right.
per year.
Something just related to riches, something that I have just laid to heart a little more than I have in times past, because usually it was like, what can I get by with the bare minimal? And at one point I was actually really looking forward to actually having no money and still traveling around. I just thought it would be such a neat testimony. But just more than the last several years, I have way more peace in having like extra money and a buffer, and because I've seen that there's more opportunities with that to give to those that have need. The scripture says, working with your own hands, to provide for your own household, but also to give to those that have need. And like a lot of times it's like, well, we're giving them like inspiration. We're giving them the gospel. We're,
Yeah.
you know, like that's of value too. But I've also really enjoyed just having extra money to be able to support, you know, house building over in Malawi, or, you know, somebody's down and out and they need some money, or a friend's coming through and you just like give them a, you know, full tank, just different things that you can do. And it's, there's quite a blessing in that as well.
Yeah, it
like
is.
your sweat, your labor that you invested into like this, you know, these little pieces of paper that represent your time and, you know, your energy and your generosity. So it's nice to share.
Yeah, that is something that happens that ends up being a big criticism anytime you talk about living very frugally.
Yeah.
Like I've known various people that have lived really frugally.
And it's seen as stinginess.
It's seen as
Right.
stinginess because, you know,
Yeah.
the guy over there that's eating steak every, you know, twice a week at the steakhouse
Mm-hmm.
is you know, providing multiple jobs and giving
Yeah.
lots of cash to the mission
Yeah.
and, you know, helping finance the new church house addition. And
Uh-huh.
and the guy that's living really frugally he's complaining about the new church house addition. And
Yeah. Yeah, right.
so
I got
you
to eat
have
baked beans every night.
yeah, like
Yeah.
I've been working so hard to scrape by, and then you guys are going wanting to spend, you know, all this cash on
Yeah.
unnecessary things. Um, so it is interesting how that whole breadth. I think throughout that whole breadth, if I can say it without letting somebody off the hook unnecessarily,
Yeah.
I think God, like I've been amazed at how much God can use people throughout the whole
Yeah.
spectrum
Yeah.
of, you know, the poverty.
Mm-hmm.
I think I think the Bible is true.
Mm-hmm. I think so too. Yeah.
I think you can err on like both sides. You can have this mendicant, like itinerant beggar who like he knows how to like say the right thing to get people to support his lifestyle, which could be a little lazy. And then there's those who just become workaholics, you know, and neglect, you know, the call of the gospel.
but you know, it says, "Blessed are the poor."
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the Bible is true.
Yeah. Do we believe that? You
Mm.
drive by some poor guy's house, like, that guy's blessed. He is blessed. It's like, no, we don't think that.
Like the trailer with the blue tarp over the top of
Yeah.
it.
But then you also see the parable of talents, where
Uh-huh.
you know, some people just buried their talents, and
Sure.
Yeah.
some people used their talents, and
Yeah.
you know.
Multiply. Yeah.
So I think sometimes poverty can be a form of fear.
Sure.
If people are afraid to use their talents.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's been, you know, throughout the centuries, like especially in the medieval ages, when, you know, Saint Francis of Assisi just leaves all his possessions in the middle of the road and walks off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's rich. He was a very rich man.
Mm.
There's always been a place for the people that are willing to just go all the way.
Yeah.
Mm. I need to redefine riches.
Yeah. I think you have to ask yourself the question, like, what are you laying up treasure for? Like, what's the purpose, the intention? What's the intention of your business? It's like, sure, you get to hire other people to help support their families. Yeah, that's good. That's helpful. That's needful. But somehow incorporating the business, whatever it may be, like I really like what Bryant is doing here with the Extend cafes, and with like having some kind of business that could support families but integrates relationships and hospitality for the sake of sharing the gospel. Somehow we need to get creative in that regard, so that we can mingle the two in a way that's healthy and biblical. Because the Lord was saying, take heed and beware of covetousness. It's a double warning there. And it's interesting, we heard say of a testimony years ago of a Catholic priest that, you know, they sit in numerous hours of confession, and he had never in all of his years heard anyone repent for being covetous, which tells us how deeply camouflaged
Yeah.
the deceitfulness of riches are in our hearts. That here's a man that he heard probably the worst atrocities of iniquity, and not one of them said, "Yeah, I'm kind of covetous, having this problem." And I heard this testimony recently of a man that he was a part of a men's group, and he was saying, "I'm really feeling that God is convicting me about the covetousness of my own money." He's like coveting his own money, like he didn't want to let it go or be generous or something like that. And it's like, wow, how many of us do that? I mean, I could say I'm guilty at times in that. Uh,
One thing I noticed from doing campus ministry is when I would engage people about, like, does wealth correlate with happiness? That question.
mhm,
It would kind of go this direction sometimes where people would use examples like, well, if there's such a love, we'll go into, is there a loving God? Like, if
mhm,
there's such a loving God, then how come there's all these people starving in Africa? Which is a legitimate question. But so I end up going to Africa for 4.5 years, and and like they would, and of course the people on campus would be using that generally, it seemed like, as an excuse not to believe in God.
mhm,
And so, but here I am in Africa, and I'm not didn't meet, or at least Malawi, Africa, and I didn't meet one atheist over 4.5 years there. And everyone that I knew that went there to spend time there, whether it was 3 months, 6 months, a year, when I would ask them, like, what was it to you that stood out about being there? And generally, it was more than one. It was probably 3 or 4 people I asked, said that the one thing they noticed is that even though even though there was, poverty, like unquestionable poverty, the people there were happier than in America.
mhm.
Like, they just had like a joy that was, you know, and I just thought that in relation to, that question, just like people would use it as an excuse, but then you go there and it's like, well, every African that I met that was poor actually believed in God and seemed to, generally have more happiness and joy that was sustained them in hardships.
Yeah.
And yeah, I remember a friend one time bringing out how, there was something about like old stories about, like, I don't know, it was the poor old happy jolly guy. Like, you have like the old Mr. Scrooge,
Mhm,
stingy, and but then you have like this. You go into Tim's house, and they're poor, but there's just like this loveliness about, and
mm,
beauty about, like, they had happiness and joy. Like, there was something blessed about it, and I think that's kind of been forgotten, or that concept has been rejected by a lot of modern American.
mm. You know what the word blessed means? It's happy.
No,
It's like
really.
happy of the poor. That's what he's saying. The word in Hebrew is asher. I mean, he's like, "Yeah, you're happy. It's like happy of the poor. Miserable of the rich." A lot of times it's true. They're the ones who put it. When we were in Africa, remember I asked
Yeah.
Edwin, I said, what's the suicide rate in this country? Because you look at the dire poverty, you're
Yeah.
thinking, like, if this was in America, they'd be running in front of freight trains.
Oh man.
You know what I mean? Like, there would be just such mass suicide. I think he says it was something like 2%. My next question was, who's killing themselves? He said the rich. That's what like these. Imagine if you couldn't feed your family. You got your kids gnawing on your arm because they're so hungry, and you got these people that could be fed to the full, and they're putting a gun to their head.
Well, they're taking antidepressants.
Yeah,
They're got,
I know,
they're
right?
just, you can go on and on about all the things that people are doing here because they're just not finding happiness.
Yeah.
And the media is telling them, now you need this to get this, and then you'll be happy. And then
Yeah.
they run after this, and then they're not happy, and then they go running after something else, and it's just the only thing that's really going to satisfy us. It seems like God designed us was for Himself. Is the only thing that can really sustain us,
Yeah.
like His Spirit um, through hardships.
Sure. Yeah.
Paul was able to find that joy in the midst of his physical body was probably suffering after getting beat, but yet he had this joy that
Yeah.
surpassed his physical suffering.
Sure. Amazing.
So tell me about what Portland, if you're going to be in Portland, I heard a little bit of talk about maybe doing something like a coffee shop. You're talking about doing some crepes,
Hmm.
maybe. Like, is this just dream stage, vision stage,
Dreams.
planning stage? Where are we at?
Yeah, I mean, we know various young people. Like, I don't know, we're older guys, but we still have a young spirit. And so we do kind of mingle among 20, 30 somethings. And we have a lot more time than a lot of people. So, and we want to invest it in relationships. So there's a network of people that we kind of spend time with and vision and dream with one another. In Portland, because it's so unchurched and it's been so dark, that there's not as much division as there are in most cities with churches. So to be a Christian in Portland, it seems like you have to be a bit more resilient because you're not really esteemed. And these are people in the workforce. These are people on university campuses and such. So they've counted the cost for their faith, and they seem to be willing to suffer for it to some degree or a large degree. And as we continue, hopefully, to just create a sanctified space, like a Goshen space, in the midst of this Egyptian gross darkness, we intend to be able to sit with people, to have Bible studies. I mean, usually we've been doing something on Tuesday night just with some friends, where we're hosting and having a meal together and just discussing life. And we hope to extend our homes to more of those types of gatherings. There's young people that have these really neat gatherings. One's called Night School, where they come together during the summertime once a week and discuss things and talk. There's Bible studies and such. And sometimes they have Old School, which is like the old guys get to come in and teach the young guys. So, and then they have something called The Life, which is, and it's all young people in their 20s and early 30s. And again, to listen to their heartbeat and to their prayer and what they desire and their vision, we'd like to try to come alongside them in a way that's healthy. Of course, there's certain things that we're going to have a little bit more difficulty with, but I think much like how Messiah was available and he was in their midst and he spent time with them, hopefully the more that we could be in these circles that they could be asking. It's like Aquila and Priscilla. They were able to show Apollos the more perfect way. And not saying that we have the perfect way. We're still growing. There's still areas in our life that there's likely blind spots. And I think if we're all honest, they're there. And you won't get to see them until hindsight. And you look back in hindsight,
right.
and or someone points it out to you. But when you're encapsulated in a bubble, oftentimes everyone thinks like you. So it's really hard to see outside of the boundaries or see like this isn't quite working. I don't know why, but like, hey, let's just keep with the program because it's worked for hundreds of years or whatever. So like we were just talking during the break that something may work, but it's not working, and you just don't want to be that kind of person that, well, you keep doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results because that's insanity, as we know, right? But yeah, we need to be bold enough to step outside and but also still maintain like the old paths. You know, it's there's a tension there. So learning to just walk that walk and dance that dance a bit. Uh, but again, as we get more established, as we build more relationships, and as Micah Hosen's down in the south, 90 miles. Scott Shones, he's going to be opening up a coffee shop in the next couple months out in Brownsville. So like there's other kingdom Christians that we hope to be in fellowship with, and I think they're really excited about an outpost in Portland for their kids, for their families, for just for themselves. I know Micah Hosen, his desire was to move into Portland. Mm-hmm. And his vision was to convert the Antifa protesters. Because if you could get those guys on your team, they're going to be mighty for the kingdom. So, yeah, we just want to provide right now an outpost. And I don't know what he's going to do, but if we yield ourselves, he'll do great things.
What area of Portland have you landed in?
We're in the northeast.
Northeast part of Portland.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we just got to move into the next phase, just prayerfully and carefully. Like, we're not the kind of guys just to like, and we don't have the capital just to like go and buy a coffee shop and just commit ourselves. That's like a marriage right there. So whatever we're going to go into it a bit slower. Like Elli, I think he has maybe thoughts of getting like a food truck or something like that, a trailer or whatever, and we've got odd jobs and things like that, but we just need to kind of
food truck
feel it out. Yeah.
There's a lot of those out there.
It's actually something that I've thought about as a way, like that's something I've really, I actually almost did one here several years back, but
Okay.
as a way, like once they're licensed in a county or a state, you can fairly, not easily, but without too much more trouble, you can get them licensed like in,
Yeah.
like say in Pennsylvania, Philadelphia and Pittsburgh are a little bit more, they require a little bit more licensing than like the rest of Pennsylvania would.
Yeah.
But once you get your truck license for Philadelphia or Pittsburgh, you can go anywhere in the state.
Okay.
And I've kind of have this idea, well, what if you could actually go out of state? Like, what if there was somebody that was building food trucks for the purpose
Of ministry.
of sending them into, Portland, into Philadelphia, and like into these big cities where they're allowed, but where you can't, where it would take millions to actually set up a restaurant.
Yeah.
What's interesting about Portland is I don't know, but I tend to believe that Portland could have been what kicked off the food cart revolution, and because they have a lot of them there. And what they do is they'll have an empty lot, and they'll have like 10, 15 food carts. It's like a big. Like what do they have in malls?
Like
the
food
food
mall.
court,
Yeah,
food
food
court,
court,
in the mall.
Gravel.
They have like a fire
court.
pit, and it's like people just hang
And it's
out.
hip. People that's just them. It's like, let's go
And
get some grub.
Portland's a real hangout culture. They'll kick it on their porch. They just like they have adults are playing softball and kickball and dodgeball. I mean, they're just like a bunch of kids that never grew up in some ways. And I think it says what was it saying? Like you retire at 30 in Portland or something like that.
Just regarding having a second occupation, I think I value first my occupation is like do the work of an evangelist. I feel like that's what I've been called to, and just the gospel of reconciliation is a labor and a work. But if I'm to have like a second job, like I've been doing some handyman stuff, and it's nice to work with my hands. I like to see things come together. You build and you're improving things, and it has its place. Like I think it's a lot of people need help in that area. But as for me, just the way I'm built, I think I'm more passionate about working with people where I'm more involved in the public. That way I can mix. Because like when you divide your time up in a day, you've only got so much time for ministry. And so like I want my second occupation to also be, to accommodate or facilitate building relationships.
And often the food service is a great way to be.
It's hospitality.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, it really is.
To be right there with people all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the downsides of food service is you can't get away from the people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'd be neat to see Sowers Harvest have like an ambassador that's just like on shift to just check on the people, how they're doing. I don't know exactly. It's so busy. And the place is a little small.
The ministry of presence, right?
Yeah, I know.
Like the guy that goes around.
We used
presence.
I worked there actually for several years on Saturdays, Fridays, and Saturdays for several years. And that was initially part of my job was but it got so busy where you couldn't even like so busy and so loud you can hardly mix.
True.
Like it's just,
Right.
which I guess that's the double-edged sword. You're super busy, lots of people come through, but then you have less time to actually interact with each person.
Well, I mean, I like what Bryant's doing, and you all here. They're doing something called the Well of Life, I think it's called.
I'm not sure what
on Tuesday nights, I think they're going to be opening the place up to ministry at night, which is good.
Yeah, everybody's trying to find that paper, right?
Yeah, feeling
I'm not sure where I put that. Yeah, no, I think that's going to be neat. I think it's going to be it's going to be interesting to see how that works out. But yeah, we all just kind of trying to figure out where we fit into the kingdom.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and any and all things that we said weren't necessarily to throw stones at any group of people or Anabaptists. They're very dear in our hearts, and this is a challenge to us as much as it is to everyone. And maybe we work through certain things more more than others in various areas, but then they have worked through and far more advanced in other areas than we are. And the idea is, how do we just break down the middle wall of partition in a sense? Because it's really similar, like the Jew and Gentile kind of thing. There's a fear on one end that maybe Anabaptists don't want to mingle too much with secular people or in big cities because what that could do to their family, and they have all kinds of statistics and other groups that have tried this. It always fails, and I'm scratching my head why more pioneers that break out of certain structures for the sake of like a more forward-minded kingdom thinking, why it doesn't work. I mean, again, like Satan is just carpet bombing churches now with strife and division, and all that live godly in Messiah are going to suffer persecution. And I believe the church is persecuting the church. You know, the bride's dress is shredded and torn, and we're at one another's throats. We're not forgiving, and there's a lot of tension. There's persecution. It's all over the place. It's just a more soft power form of it, and it's in the form of sexual immorality and gross opulence and wealth and selfishness, again, and church splits and divides. And don't misunderstand me. I mean, some churches need to split. Some of them need to divide. Some of them are not healthy. Some of the doctrine is bad. But generally speaking, like we got to start learning how to see one another's strengths and try to work together. You know.
We have to learn how to fight better. And actually, I've just finished up a book on that.
Did you?
That I wrote about church conflict.
What was it entitled?
Well,
I'm
not sure what the title's going to be about.
Oh, it's in the process.
It's in the process.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not,
all right.
It's not published yet, but
all right.
But no, I feel like that. Yeah, that's like one of the that's one of the main things that is holding churches back is our inability to communicate internally.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like we just can't do conflict internally. Like we don't know how to fight. We don't know how to. You know, we either get all mad and just slaughter each other, or we.
So much for non-resistance, huh?
I mean, or we just.
It's a different form. It's not. You know. It's what is it? Jeremiah says. It said in Jeremiah, "Let us smite him with the tongue, that we give not heed to any of his words." It's a form of persecution, slander, and division like that.
And it's more likely in a traditional Anabaptist setting that you're going to people are just going to be quiet. Like they're just not going to. Like the conflict that you see is more of people just not saying anything outright. Now they'll gossip behind the scenes, but they're not going to actually confront an issue. They're just going to say, "Well, that didn't work out. Let's back off." Yeah. And that I think that's happening all over, where there are visionaries, there are people that have, there are young men that dream dreams, but they're just slowly crunched because they don't understand they haven't been taught how to communicate.
Sure.
They don't know how that works. And then if they try, they get squashed.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
So
it's daunting. They don't want to even step up and try anything.
And then you have, carnal retaliation and all kinds of things go wrong. But I think it is like the thing that is holding churches back today.
Yeah, we need men of peace, because it says, "Blessed are the peacemakers."
Right. Not peacekeepers.
Yeah. Yeah. They go into the midst of conflict.
Right.
That's what peacemakers do. And it's like you don't have peacemakers in a place of peace. I mean, you can, but really they're meant to go into the forefront of the hottest battle and make peace.
And sometimes that means, peeling some of that bandage off the wound and, lancing the wound a little bit.
It's a proverb to the counselors of peace, there's joy.
Yeah. Right.
Like when you can actually go in there and in a chaotic, strifeful situation, and you can produce peace, that does produce a lot of joy.
Yeah, quietness is not peace.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's.
We're not resolving issues that way.
Might do more damage. Yeah. I've seen it.
I mean, there's probably something to be gained by just refusing to engage with an argument, because then you can just be right and nobody can bother you.
Yeah.
But that isn't the only solution that should ever. I mean, it's not like that's the only ever the answer.
Yeah. So we got work to do. All of us, right?
Yeah. Wow.
just it's good to bear the yoke in our youth and even in our old age.
And y'all have lived so many adventures, like just talking to y'all over the years, like so many things that y'all have done. I can't hardly imagine that this is going to be anything less of an adventure in Portland. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm really
Right.
excited to see what's going to happen, what God's going to do next in Portland.
Everyone and anyone watching, please lift up a prayer and send up some incense on our behalf. Because I feel like we're Gideon's army a lot of times. We're just this cake of barley bread that's just kind of stumbling and rolling down the mountain. But it was effective. It smote the Midianites.
Mm-hmm.
So, they were reduced to quite a few people.
That's what's so fun, like reading the Old Testament, like again and again and again, God did that. Like, yeah, 20,000 people, too many. Send them home. Send them home. Send them home. Like, 300, that's too many, but I guess we can go with that.
That's not how we think. And then when you take your 300 men, you divide them up in companies of 3. Like, you don't even stick together. You know what I mean? And we're going to go out against these guys with just a shofar or a trumpet,
a loaf of bread,
and just, you know what I mean, and a pitcher and some lamps. But when the lamps get broken, the lights shine. And so when we could be in a more broken, yielded place, we could send the enemy to flight and have some victory here. So may He help us to be more broken and more yielded to His Spirit. And like, God, you got to show up, because if you don't, we're in trouble, and your name and reputation's on the line. So please, like, for the sake of your glory, that it wouldn't be trampled underfoot, raise something up. Not to any of our praise, that's whatsoever, but to his glory and sanctification of His name.
Yeah, well, Gabriel, Micaiah, and Elli, thanks for being on.
Pleasure. Thanks for having us. It's great.
Thank you for listening. If you find value in these conversations, please share them with others. Now go set the world on fire.